Welcome to the Believer's Transformation Series level number 1. This is lesson number 5, and it's brought to you in part by the Pendleton Lighthouse Church. Let's get started. As a review of the last lesson, and as the platform for all of these lessons, we talked about the power of prayer. In my finite mind, I probably would have put that prayer lesson first, but I'm going to tell you the little story of how these came together, because they were all born out of prayer. I went to a director's meeting on Saturday night. I was not a director at our church, but my husband was feeling kind of sick. He asked me if I would come with him in case he had to step out for a while. I could still let him know what was going on. And I went to that meeting and they gave me a department. It's they new believers course, and I wasn't truthfully very excited about it. But I'm obedient. And then the very next morning, Sunday morning, I got up to pray. I have been doing a lot of praying, and this was my regular prayer, and I was praying, and then I just kind of saw the papers that my pastor gave to me about this department and said, okay, God, what am I supposed to do about that? In English, I wasn't speaking in tongues. I wasn't travailing. I do all those things, but that's not how this came along. And God spoke to me and said, get a pencil and paper because I'm going to tell you what you're going to do and you have to write it down. And if you don't write it down, you'll forget it. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what God said to me. I ran and got a paper. I cherish this little blue piece of paper. It's the back of a mistake of one of the newsletters that goes into the prison. I just found the first paper I could find. And God told me that he wanted me to have this new, Believers Transformation Series. He told me very specifically, and I have said this before, this is not just for new believers. If you are a new believer, this series will be great for you. But this series is also for people who are coming back. And I believe I live in the end time generation. I live in the time when thousands of people who have left are coming back. And you need a transformation in your mind. And this is for you. And this is also, God very plainly told me, because judgment starts in the house of God. Again, I live in the end time generation. This is also for people who've been sitting on the pews for years and years and years. And they need a transformation in their mind. For whatever reason, it's become stale. For whatever reason, they've grown cold. For whatever reason, they need a transformation. So out of prayer came this whole series. And God only gave me just the titles and told me very specifically that when I got ready to put them together, he would help me with all the details. And he most certainly has. He has pretty much shown me what's in level 2 of the series, and I'm just trying to be obedient. But really, there is no substitute for your whole foundation of all your life on prayer. And the other things that we've been talking about in this series. Let's review those. Now, first lesson, you have to have a relationship and not a religion. If you have only a religion, you need to stop and have a relationship. And we've talked about your heart, taking a very close look at your heart and having those old things passed away. Become a new creature. Be in Christ. It takes work to take off all that stuff, but you aren't the same person you used to be. And then we talked about how important it is to read the Bible, and that the Bible is the light to your path. You won't know where you're going. This world is full of darkness, and you need His Word to guide you. And then this lesson number 4 was about prayer and the importance of prayer. And so we're going to go to lesson number 5, which is today's lesson. The title of it is Your Job in the Harvest Field. That's the exact words that God gave me for the title when I wrote it down. And I remember thinking, boy, that's an interesting thing for, I wasn't even sure where this was going. I thought, wow, that's a very different title of something to teach on. But God has really dealt with me and shown me some things in the Bible that I have never seen before. I've never heard preached before. And I'm hoping to share those with you, because really you do have a job in the harvest field. Now, I have been studying every time Jesus prayed. It's a great study. If you're a up and coming preacher, look at all the different times that Jesus prayed. The exact little words that he said. But it occurred to me when I was studying all this that Jesus only really had one prayer request. Only one time did he ask other people to pray with him about something. All the other times he was taking authority and dominion and he was praying. But this one time he had a prayer request, and he said, "Therefore say he unto them, the harvest is truly great." He's just making a statement, and it is, "but the laborers are few." And remember the title of this message. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he would send forth laborers into the harvest. To send forth means they actually have to go. It's not a question if there's a harvest. And there's not even really a question if there is any laborers. He said there were few, but there are some. But they need to be sent forth, that he would send forth laborers into the harvest. And I believe that's what he's done in this lesson. He is trying to send you and send me into the harvest. It's our job. That's where our job is, in the harvest field. So it's an amazing thing to think that Jesus only had one prayer request. I've had thousands, millions. He had one. And that prayer request was for you. Jesus prayed for you. When you're out there talking to someone about Jesus, Jesus has prayed for you and that conversation. Jesus has been there. He knows all of time from before the foundations of the world. So when you are in that harvest field, you have a direct link with God, like nothing else, when you're telling someone about him, because he prayed for you. Now, I've had people pray for me, and wow, when they did, I felt it. But this is even greater than anything I could have ever experienced. This is Jesus Christ himself praying for me. So that is the connection that you have when you're in the harvest field. Now, Revelations 12:11 says this, "And they overcame him," they're talking about the beast, this is the end of the time, "by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death." My pastor's been preaching about Revelations. I just read the book of Revelations again, It's an amazing book. It is the revelation of Jesus Christ. We sometimes shorten its name and we don't really see what it's really trying to tell us. And this is an amazing verse. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb. You have to know that he died for you and took your place. His blood is the only atonement. You cannot earn it. You cannot anything else. You have to get it from him. It's his blood. And by the word of their testimony. I know I'd seen this before, and I know I'd heard it before, but there was something about it when I read it this last time. By the word of their testimony. That's how you overcome the enemy. The word of your testimony. And then it goes back to the first and second lesson of this series. They loved not their lives unto the death. If you love Jesus, you'll do his commandment. If you're having a love relationship with him and not a religion, it's easy to serve God. It's hard to serve God when it's a bunch of rules. It's hard when it's not out of love. But they didn't love their lives. They loved him more than their physical life unto the death. So these three elements is what overcomes the enemy. I thought, wow, that's powerful. Again, when God gave me the title of this, I never put these thoughts together. I never heard this together. And so I was like, there it is, God. And a lot of people want an example out of the Bible. I want examples, and there's no better example than Paul. Paul, in Acts chapter 9, and then again in Acts 22, wrote out his entire personal testimony of his conversion on the road to Damascus. He didn't just write it once, he wrote it out twice. 2 times he wrote it all down. That's his testimony, his personal testimony. And he probably told it hundreds and hundreds of times if he wrote it out twice. And I thought, man, I need to align myself with the people in the Bible. If they did that, their personal conviction, their personal transformation, their personal story, and I shared it with you on the second lesson. I was 15 and a drug addict, and I went into a room and I prayed for 3 days and I repented. That was the beginning of my journey towards God. When I came out of that room, I was no longer addicted to drugs, and that baby was perfectly fine. There was no birth defects or side effects from the things that I had been doing. The transformation, my salvation started that day in that room. Now that's my story, but I'm sure you've got one too. And I also gave you the story of how I prayed for my son Josh in the middle of the night through prayer. I gave you a testimony how prayer saved his life. Those little testimonies are just as important as the big one. Paul gives little ones as much as he gives his personal salvation testimony. And you need to have yours. Now, yours doesn't have to be like Paul's, struck down, blind, 3 days. You just don't have to be mine, 3 days in a bedroom, drinking only water, coming out unaddicted to drugs. But it's yours. That's the beauty of it. It has to be yours. Because no one can argue with you about what happened to you. Now, people will argue about the Bible. I helped do a correspondence course inside of a prison, and men want to argue. Little things. It's amazing sometimes. I'm like, really? And they just want to argue. I don't know what drives people to argue, but they cannot argue with what happened to me personally. No one can tell me I didn't go into that room. No one can tell me that God didn't deliver me completely from drugs. No one could have told Paul that he wasn't struck blind for 3 days. That was his. Nobody can argue with what's happened to you. That's the beauty of your testimony. Why it works so effective when you're in the field. They can reject the Bible, but it's hard. They can't. Well, they can, but it's just a whole nother matter when you are telling them your story. And that's what God's asking you to do. He's asking you to share your story. Now, your story might be completely different than mine, but it's going to reach a completely different group of people than mine will. So everyone's story is just as important as someone else. Some people try to tell me, well, I've always been good and I've never done drugs, so I don't have a testimony. Oh, no, yes, you do. You had a day when you got hungry. You had events that led up to a turning point in your life. And there's people out there that are just like you. This one in 1 Peter 3:15 says, but sanctify the Lord in your hearts. And I know we've talked a lot about your heart. And be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you the reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. See, when people see you on the job, they know you have something different that they don't got. Even if you just started coming or just started coming back, people can tell right away there's something different. That's the reason of the hope that's in you. And you can tell it with meekness and fear. Don't exaggerate. Don't make the devil look big. Don't do any of those things. Just tell them your story. Just share. You know what? The amazing thing is when you share your story, usually they have a story too that God's writing in their life. And that's why they're drawn to you. That's why they ask you, just like this verse says. So be ready to share your story. Now, there's power in a testimony, a power that you can't get anywhere else. Not only because it's your story and no one can argue with it, but as you're telling it, you're going to feel it. God's going to give you the power. Now, please do not take this the wrong way, but I know there's many churches that have people write out or present their testimony to the church. I, I get that. That's fine. That's a good thing to do. That's going to build your faith. But really, you need to tell your testimony not just to people who are saved in a church. You need to tell it to the people who need to hear it, the lost, because they need hope. The people in the church, that's good that you did that. I'm not knocking that at all. And I know a lot of churches do that. And I'm not knocking that at all. But I'm just saying the people that you really need to be testifying to is the people who don't know God, the people who need hope. Here's a vineyard, and God very specifically put this story in my mind preparing about your job in the field. I know it's a vineyard, but it's Jesus talking, and he said, but what think ye? A certain man had 2 sons, and he came to the first and said, Son, go work today in my vineyard. And he answered and said, I will not. But afterwards he repented and went. And I know there's some of you that are saying, I'm shy. I can't tell anybody what the Lord has done for me. And he came to the second son and said likewise. And he answered and said, I go, sir, and went not. He got excited. Yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to write out my personal testimony. I'm going to make a long version and a short version. I got a plan. I know what parts I want to talk about. And after they got done with this lesson, they didn't do it. Whether of the twain did the will of his father? And they said unto him, the first. This parable was a no-brainer. It was the son who said, I won't go. But then afterwards, he went and did it. He repented. So the point of this story, and I think that God put this in my head to show you, is you can't just be excited and say, okay, I'm going to go talk. I'm going to start writing it down. I'm going to make a plan. It's not those people that just start. It's the people that finish. So what would you do? Or what are you going to do? Or what have you done? Now, I'm just going to give you a few little tips here to get going. Now, if you record yourself on your on your iPhone, on your phone, you can just jot down a few notes. So you got it in your head before you start talking. No one's going to see those notes, so it doesn't matter if everything's spelled right or you wrote out every word. A lot of people, that's how I am. I just need a little refresher and I'm rolling. I'm going. Other people like to write it all out meticulously, every word what they're going to say. That's fine. But you should be able to have this testimony so that at a drop of a hat, you can tell it to anyone. Somebody says, hey, what happened to you? You can tell them. Or you're different than everyone else. You can tell them why. You have an answer. And you should probably have a short version and a long version. For me, my short version doesn't always include I was 15 and pregnant and addicted to drugs and I went into a room and repented. Sometimes I just say, from the time I was a child, God was dealing with me. My heart wanted God. I was very far from God. The things I was doing was very far, but I just kept trying and I just kept reading the Bible and I just kept praying and I just kept going to church. And after time, God did things for me. It doesn't always have to have all the gruesome details in it. You can change your testimony to fit what works with that person. But you do need to write it down or record it or start telling it. Now, if you go to Lighthouse, my church, go talk to Jim. He'll record it for you if you don't want to do your own phone, or get alone with yourself. Start praying. Ask God what he wants to say. Post it on Facebook. You'll be shocked what comes of it. You will be shocked. People are hungry. You know what? They're hungry for real people. They're hungry for the real God. They've seen so much from this world and trickery from TV people and all these things. If you just are you and you tell your story of your experience in the field that God put you, God will do the rest. Now I'm going to end with this one. This is in Matthew as long as also with Mark. But this is Jesus talking, and it's very last words that he said to his disciples as he was leaving. And he said unto them, go ye into all the world. And we think, oh, I got to go be an evangelist. No, I got to go be a missionary. No, go ye into all the world. Your world starts right where you are. Your job, your neighbors, your family, your world. And tell every person. I tell kids. I tell old people. I tell young people. I have to tell the hope of glory that's in me. It's all about God. It's all about Him. And He is commanding you. This is an imperative sentence. I'm a school teacher, sorry. Imperative means a command. Go ye. That's Jesus Christ Himself telling you. And remember from that slide before, He prayed for you. So when you do go, you will be empowered by Jesus Himself. He wants you to go into all the world. The world needs you. The world needs Jesus. All the world is the harvest field. Please take the time. Make a few different testimonies. Write them out. Ad-lib them on your cell phone. Post them onto Facebook. Make a proclamation. You know what? Once you post out on Facebook, you tell people I'm really living for God now. If you've been kind of shaky or whatever, or if you've been living for God, nobody you're like, wow, but she hasn't done anything for a while. Look at her. You know what? It will make a difference. It will make a difference how people are treating you. It will make a difference on the amount of temptation that comes to you. It will make a difference in your life because it's your job. And at the end of this life, we do get a crown. We do get a reward. He's the one who saves us. It's by the blood of the Lamb. It's His salvation message. But it's by the word of your testimony and not loving your life, loving only Him. So I hope this lesson blessed you. I hope that you are a doer of the word and be like the son who maybe at first said, I'm not going to go do that. And then you repent and go ye into all the world. God bless you.